Wilhelm Gustloff, 1945. On the night of January 30th, 1945, the Wilhelm Gustloff departed from the port of Gotenhafen, now Gdynia, in Poland. The ship was part of Operation Hannibal, a massive evacuation organized by Nazi Germany to remove civilians, wounded soldiers and military personnel from areas about to fall into Soviet hands. Designed to carry around 1,800 people, the ship left port heavily overcrowded. On board were women, children, elderly people, wounded soldiers, naval cadets. Estimates suggest that more than 10,000 people were packed inside the ship. A few hours after leaving port, already in open waters of the Baltic Sea, the Wilhelm Gustloff was detected by the Soviet submarine S-13. Without warning, 3 torpedoes were fired. The first struck the bow, where dozens of crew members were sleeping. The second exploded in the center of the ship, destroying crowded internal areas. The third hit the engine room, leaving the ship completely without power. Within minutes, the ship began to list. Less than an hour after the torpedo strikes, the Wilhelm Gustloff disappeared beneath the waters. Doña Paz, 1987. On the night of December 20th, 1987, just a few days before Christmas, the Philippine ferry, Doña Paz, was sailing calmly across the Philippine Sea. The journey was supposed to be simple, a routine trip between islands filled with families returning home, workers and children excited for the holiday season. But that night would become the worst peacetime maritime disaster in history. The Doña Paz was officially authorized to carry around 1,500 passengers. That night, however, more than 4,000 people were on board. Many passengers were not registered. Extra tickets were common. The ship sailed dangerously overcrowded. At around 10:30 p.m., while crossing a dark and poorly monitored route, the ferry collided with the oil tanker MT Vector, which was carrying thousands of liters of highly flammable fuel. The impact was immediate, but the worst came seconds later. The fuel spread across the sea and ignited. Within moments, the ocean surrounding the ship was on fire. The Doña Paz was consumed by a floating inferno. Titanic, 1912. In the early hours of April 15, 1912, the world awoke to news that seemed impossible. The largest, most luxurious, and most advanced ship ever built at the time had disappeared beneath the ocean. The Titanic was not just a shipwreck. It became an eternal symbol of human fragility in the face of nature. The Titanic departed on its maiden voyage on April 10, 1912, bound for New York. On board were more than 2,200 people, including passengers and crew, among them some of the richest individuals in the world. On the night of April 14th, the ship was sailing through the North Atlantic, a region known for the presence of icebergs. Several warnings had been sent by other ships about drifting ice. Even so, the Titanic maintained high speed, trusting in its modern design and in the belief that it was practically unsinkable. At 11:40 p.m., the lookout spotted an iceberg directly ahead. The maneuver came too late. The iceberg scraped along the starboard side of the ship, opening breaches below the waterline. 6 compartments began to flood, more than the ship could withstand. The fate of the Titanic was sealed. The evacuation was slow, confused, and unequal. Women and children were given priority. Many men were left behind. Some lifeboats were launched half-empty, while hundreds of people still remained on deck. At 2:20 a.m., just over 2 hours after the collision, the Titanic broke in two and sank completely. More than 1,500 people died, most from hypothermia in near-freezing waters. USS Estonia, 1994. In the early hours of September 28, 1994, the Baltic Sea was rough. Strong winds, high waves, and total darkness dominated the route between Estonia and Sweden. It was a routine crossing. Hundreds of passengers were traveling to work, visit family members, or simply continue their journey. No one on board imagined that within a few hours, that ship would become the scene of one of the worst maritime disasters in modern Europe. The ferry MS Estonia departed from the port of Tallinn, bound for Stockholm, on the night of September 27th. On board were 989 people, including passengers and crew. Around 1 a.m., the ship was facing violent waves. That was when something critical happened at the bow. The bow visor, a large metal door used for vehicle entry, began to suffer from the constant impact of the waves. Under enormous pressure, the structure failed. When the visor broke loose, water rapidly flooded the vehicle deck. The effect was devastating. Within minutes, the ship began to list dangerously to one side. Objects shifted. Vehicles moved. Passengers were thrown against walls and corridors. The Estonia lost stability almost instantly. Less than 30 minutes later, the ship completely capsized and sank into the Baltic Sea. USS Kiangya, 1948. In December 1948, China was living through one of the most chaotic periods in its history. The country was engulfed in the Chinese Civil War, with cities overcrowded by civilians trying to escape the conflict. It was in this atmosphere of fear, urgency, and disorganization that the SS Kiangya entered history as one of the deadliest maritime disasters of the 20th century. The SS Kiangya was a passenger ship operating on the Yangtze River, one of the busiest river routes in the world. On December 4, 1948, the ship departed heavily overcrowded. Although its official capacity was much lower, thousands of people were on board. They included entire families, war refugees, workers attempting to escape combat zones. During the journey, the ship struck a submerged naval mine, a remnant of previous military operations in the river. The explosion was devastating. The hull ruptured instantly. Internal compartments were destroyed. Passengers near the point of the explosion were killed on impact. Within minutes, the Kiangya began to sink rapidly. Kursk, 2000. On August 12, 2000, the Russian Navy was conducting a large military exercise in the Barents Sea, north of the Arctic Circle. Among the vessels involved was the Kursk, one of Russia's most modern and powerful nuclear submarines, a symbol of military strength, a symbol of technology, a symbol of invulnerability. Just hours later, it would disappear, taking 118 crew members with it. During the exercise, the Kursk was preparing to simulate a torpedo launch. At approximately 11:28 a.m., an internal explosion occurred in the submarine's torpedo compartment. Later investigations indicated that a torpedo containing highly unstable fuel leaked, triggering the first detonation. This initial explosion was powerful, but it did not completely destroy the submarine. About 2 minutes later, a second explosion occurred, far more powerful. It was equivalent to hundreds of kilograms of TNT. The impact was so intense that seismic sensors in nearby countries registered the event. Internal compartments were crushed. The submarine violently fell to the seabed. The Kursk came to rest at a depth of about 108 meters. Most of the crew died instantly. USS Thresher, 1963. On the morning of April 10, 1963, the United States Navy was conducting a routine test in the North Atlantic, about 350 kilometers off the coast of Massachusetts. The central vessel of that mission was the USS Thresher, a nuclear attack submarine considered one of the most advanced of its time. The objective was simple, to perform deep diving tests following an extended maintenance period, but that morning would forever mark naval history and become part of the list of the worst deaths at sea of all time. During the test dive, the USS Thresher descended progressively toward extreme depths, accompanied by a support ship on the surface. At approximately 9:13 a.m., messages began to be transmitted from the submarine to the support vessel. The communications indicated technical problems. Later investigation revealed that a failure in a piping system allowed high-pressure seawater to enter the submarine. This leak caused a short circuit, leading to the automatic shutdown of the nuclear reactor, a safety procedure known as a scram. Without propulsion, the submarine began to sink uncontrollably. Attempts to expel the water using compressed air failed, possibly due to valves freezing. Minutes later, the USS Thresher exceeded its maximum structural depth. The hull could not withstand the pressure. The submarine imploded. In fractions of a second, 129 people, including crew members and civilian engineers, died instantly. If you'd like to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and feel free to leave suggestions for upcoming videos in the comments.